Hello everyone, welcome to my Resident Evil 3 Remake, Inferno difficulty, no damage, no shop items, S-rank walkthrough, and this is going to be from the hospital area to the final boss fight. And in the beginning, we have to play as Carlos in order to get the vaccine for Jill, and they've made a couple of enemy changes to this location. So, that right there, originally on the other difficulties there would be a couple of zombies, but they replaced it with a licker, and I think that's one of the most elegant design choices ever, because it shows that the developers respect the lethality of the lickers, that the lickers are worse than a couple of zombies, and, you know, Capcom did the exact same thing with Resident Evil 7 on Madhouse difficulty. I remember in the furnace room, down in the basement area, the Baker household, originally on normal difficulty, there would be a couple of molded that you had to deal with, but then on Madhouse difficulty, they replaced it with one single fast molded, which I thought was really, really cool. And it changed up the flow of the level really nicely. And, you know, there are times when this game can embrace such elegant choices like that, but for the most part, this game embraces a lot of unelegant design choices when it comes to randomly placing enemies everywhere and just putting tons of enemies in the same room. It can be quite a mess. And the laboratory area really suffers for this, but thankfully I didn't struggle too much with the laboratory section. I had to restart it several times, and I thought it was going to mess up a lot on the third boss fight, because the third boss fight is the worst boss on this game. But I managed to get it on the first try, which was surprising. And also right here, after you pick up the key, there's going to be a hunter that will spawn in this hallway. We're not going to deal with him just yet. We are going to instead make our way over to this room, and we are going to grab the hospital keycard. And when we make our way out of this room, there's going to be another hunter that spawns. And also, make sure you kill this guy, because when you pick up the hospital ID card, all of the zombies in this room will get up. And rather than waste a flash grenade, I'll just kill that guy so that he's not in the way when I'm trying to backtrack out of this room. You definitely need to save at least 2 flash grenades for the defend Jill sequence, because it can be pretty tricky when you have those hunters participating with the zombies when it comes to killing you. And I have a pretty good strategy for the defend Jill sequence, but I'll get to it when I get to that part of the game. But here comes a hunter right now. What I do to deal with this hunter is I punch him by doing method 1 for doing the cross punch, which is pressing R1 during the recovery frames of the shove animation. And then I go to the side, because one of the dumbest things about the hunters on this game is when they are jumping off the ground, it is actually a hitbox. So if they touch you with their feet when they are getting up off the ground, you will take damage. It's definitely one of the dumbest design choices in this game, because there are a lot of moments where you have to keep repeatedly punching a hunter so that he doesn't attack you very quickly. And if you mess up, or if you get stuck in the recovery frames of your shove, you just can't get away. And it's very, very dumb. I don't agree with it whatsoever. But this room right here, make sure when you're running away from that hunter, you shove through the door, because the lickers can't actually hear you when you shove or when you're dodging as Jill. And you have to make sure you're aiming to cancel the recovery frames of the shove animation quicker so that you can move forward, because I've never been hit by the hunter when I'm entering this room, but he has always done an attack animation whenever I enter this room, so it's definitely recommended you get that additional speed boost whenever you're trying to use the shove. And then this right here, wait for the pale head to walk 3 steps and then shove him. For some reason with that particular pale head, he will always get knocked over via the shove. He will try to bust down the door to get into this room, but we're going to stop that. Because just like Resident Evil 2 Remake, when you go through 2 doors, you stop the zombies from busting through doors. And this is the room that gave me a lot of trouble, because I don't really understand what the developers expect you to do. So, what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to kill this first hunter by exposing his weak spot. And the method for doing so is I'm going to repeatedly punch him just to keep him stun locked. And I'm going to fire once from my pistol in order to do damage to his head in order to expose it. And then once his head is exposed, it'll be a little bit easier to stun lock him, because every single time you aim after the cross punch, you will be able to automatically lock onto his head. It looks like a pretty good method, but it isn't. The forward momentum that the shove gives you can cause you to be put in bad positions. So for instance, you might accidentally put yourself behind the hunter, and he will do his backhand attack, and it's almost impossible to stop with the shove, because the shove isn't really the best when it comes to detection. And if you've seen my poor designs of RE3 Remake videos, you will understand why I say fighting hunters as Carlos is really bad, because the shove has really bad detection on the hunter sometimes. But right here, whenever the hunter's weak spots are exposed, they mainly prioritize the instant kill attack. And thankfully you can stop it with the shove, but if you are on the left-hand side of the hunter, the forward momentum from the shove can cause you to be put behind him, so you have to make sure you're standing on the right-hand side of where the hunter is, so that you don't put yourself in a bad spot whenever you do the shove. Also, be careful. When you initiate the slow-mo, Carlos is pulled away from the hunter, and it can mess with the shove's detection. So to counteract this, I recommend you try to move forward during the slow-mo. But right there is the method that I use to get the audio tape while still dealing with the hunter. I push him into that corner, and during the animation of doing the shove or the cross-punch, I pick it up. It's better to pick it up during the cross-punch animation, because if you try to pick it up during the shove animation, it will screw with your ability to do the follow-up with the cross-punch. But now that section's done, I'm going to go into this room to the left to get a flash grenade and a grenade. I use a grenade here just to get rid of the horde surrounding the door, and then I use the hospital keycard here. And I'm just going to use a flash grenade to stun the horde when they decide to bust through the door. And cool thing, you can use flash grenades to stop the enemies from biting you, so even when the enemies grab you, if your flash grenade detonates at the right moment, you will not incur any damage, as you saw right there. And you can come back to this area as Jill, but for this walkthrough, I only go to one particular room of the hospital, and then I just go down into the basement area, because that's what I did the last time I played this game, and it made the laboratory section tough, but it was still doable. And I figure, if I'm able to show this game using the bare minimum of resources, you will have no trouble whatsoever if you decide to pick up additional resources. And you will get a lot of ammo if you choose to go through this hospital area as Jill. It's just, you'll have to deal with additional enemies that spawn. And I didn't want to put up with that. But we're about to gain access to the vaccine, and I'm going to take the time to explain how the Defend Jill sequence is going to work. So, the Defend Jill sequence on this game works very similarly to Chapter 6 of Akumu difficulty of the Evil Within, where during the Burning House section of that game, you can control the spawn by saving a couple of enemies so that the spawn completely stops. And for this sequence, if you save 4 zombies, you will be able to stop the spawn of zombies, but you will not be able to stop spawning the hunters. The hunters will still spawn regardless of what you do. But the good news is, with the grenade that I picked up from the RPD building, I'm going to be able to kill one of the hunters with the grenades, because the enemies have less health on the Defend Jill sequence. And then for the second hunter, I can use a generator to stun him, and then just lay into him with the assault rifle, although it takes a lot of ammo to kill hunters when you're not aiming for their weak spots. And if that doesn't work, what I can also do is use flash grenades, and there's a reason why you need at least 2 flash grenades for this sequence. It's because of the hunters, and also because of any potential mistake on your part if you end up messing up in controlling the zombies. And when it comes to controlling the zombies, follow exactly what I do. I'm going to be using the generator to keep the 4 zombies stunned, and I'm going to eliminate the other threats. So you always want to get rid of this guy, and then you need to get rid of this guy here, because he will always go on the door to try to get to Jill. And there's going to be another zombie that will spawn from that window where I killed the first zombie. And before I deal with him, I'm going to stun these zombies over here with the generator. But I made a mistake. I should have stood in this spot where I'm at right now a little bit earlier, because you'll notice that guy on the left is walking around and he's nowhere near the generator. It's because I was in the wrong position when he was rising up off the ground. So I affected his pathing, and the pathing on the zombies on this game is really bad. It's just as bad as Resident Evil 2 Remake, because it works off the exact same AI system. And I have no idea how Capcom can go from enemies that had no noticeable pathing issues to enemies that just wander all over the place and you can't even walk in a straight line. Like, how am I meant to be scared of drunk zombies? If anything, it's frustrating trying to deal with it. The dodge and the cross punch are very reliant upon the pathing on the zombies, because how the zombies walk will affect the timing on those defensive moves and the kind of attack the zombies will do. So when you're trying to do the generator strategy, as I'm showing here, you have to make sure you are standing at the right position to make sure you are influencing the pathing on the zombies whenever they get out of a stun. And in the event this doesn't work out, you need to be reliant upon methods like this. And what I'm doing is I'm exploiting the zombies' lack of location mapping in order to get them to repeatedly do the NA-alpha grab into geometry. This will also work in that desk area near those double doors on my right, and you can literally loop 2 or 3 zombies using the method I just used. And when it comes to that desk area, you always want to make sure that you're controlling the pathing on the zombies by getting them to do the grab animation, and then moving either to the left or to the right so that they're moving actively with you, and you can prevent them from going around the corner and just grabbing you. That was originally the strategy that I used for this sequence, but it wasn't really working out because it was so hard to control the zombies, but this method works out so much better. And all 4 of the zombies are stunned right now, and typically, after all 4 of the zombies have broken out of the stun, it takes roughly 3 seconds for the generator to restart. And when the lights go out, you have to stun them again and prep a grenade, because a hunter is about to bust out of this door right here. And you can actually hit him through that door using a grenade when he starts bashing on the door. I saw SHAREfactory do that on his Twitch live stream, and I was very surprised. But once he's dead, you need to get back to this spot very quickly and shoot the generator the moment it starts to activate. And make sure you're standing in the right position to influence the pathing on the zombies. If you get any moments where there are zombies not really close to the generator, what you need to do is, instead of punching them when you're close to them, stand at a distance and use method 1 for using the cross punch, where you press R1 during the recovery frames of the shove to do the cross punch. Because what can happen is the forward momentum of the shove can put you in a very unfavorable position, and you can accidentally put yourself very close to a zombie's grab, and they will grab you the moment they come out of the animation. And also, I learned something about the knockdown animation that you inflict upon them when you do the cross punch. When they are in the knockdown animation, if you try to use the generator during that animation, they will not get affected by the generator. So you have to make sure that they are in a neutral state of rising up off the ground before you decide to hit that generator if you knock them over with a cross punch. And I put the enemies in a very bad spot right now, because now they're moving about very freely. And also, Tyrell just said almost got it. You have to bear that in mind, because there's going to be a second hunter that spawns about a minute after he says that. And you need to pay attention to the shutters to get an idea as to when the hunter is going to spawn. The best reference point I can give you for when the hunter will spawn is when the shutters are relatively close to Carlos's head. And I threw a flash grenade just then because the enemies were out of control, and also because I wanted to put myself in the right position to influence their pathing, and right here is the perfect spot to influence their pathing, just to get them to come this way. And be careful of her, she's gonna spam grab. They love to spam grab on hardcore difficulty and above. And all of them are stunned by the generator again. So I'm gonna repeat the method again, and this is actually the right point in time for the hunter to come. The shutters are close to Carlos's height, and there it is. There's the hunter, and I'm going to have to use the generators and the flash grenades to my advantage and if I want to take out this guy. Back in the room where the first hunter busted out of, there is another flash grenade you can use, but you do not want to use it early. You need to save that flash grenade for the final phase of this fight, where you have to place the C4 in its spot and detonate the pillar. And right now the hunter's putting pressure on me, so I'm going to have to use the flash grenade, and this kills him, thankfully. But at this point, I'm trying to grab the flash grenade right now, and I'm also trying to re-engage the loop with the generators, but I didn't have to. Look at the shutters right now. The shutters are very low. There's no way any zombies will get in. So this is the perfect time for me to kill these guys, and it takes me a while to realize this because I'm still kind of in that mindset of re-engaging the loop. And then I spot the shutters, and then I decide to take him out, and it is going to end right here. And did you see? He tried to do the NA-alpha grab, even though that desk was in his way. Like I said, the lack of location mapping is really beneficial for controlling the spawn in this encounter. So get rid of all of them, and then the final phase is going to begin. Make sure you picked up the C4 before this cutscene, because then you're going to have to go through additional animations in order to plant the C4 in. And now that the C4 is in place, go ahead and throw a flash grenade. And all you gotta do now is wait until the zombies start to recover from the animation, and then shoot the generators. If you get any moments where there are zombies close to you after you shoot both generators, take them out very quickly. And you have just done one of the hardest parts of the game. And when they say this game is designed for knife only, do you see any possible way to do this sequence knife only? It's just physically impossible. There's too many enemies, and controlling a whole bunch of enemies without the use of your guns is just impossible with how bullcrap this game can be at times. And I tried doing this section knife only so many times, and every single time the gameplay would just fall apart, and I would just question what I was doing with my time playing this game, when I was wasting my time trying to satisfy something that isn't even possible on this game unless you use shop items. Because the coins that were originally introduced in Resident Evil 7 as DLC are back in this game. So you have the Assault and Defense coins, and I don't remember what the other coins are, but everyone just uses the Assault and Defense coins, and you get 2 of each particular type of coin. So you can have 2 Assault coins and 2 Defense coins in your inventory, and you will just wreck the game. And Carcinogen SDA did a Inferno difficulty, no damage, with shop items run of Resident Evil 3 Remake, and he was decimating every single enemy he came across. Like, hunters, piece of cake. Paleheads, piece of cake. Any alpha parasites, piece of cake. And then the bosses, an absolute joke. Like, I just don't understand why Capcom has to put in these kind of shop items. And they haven't even clarified in their statement about knife-only runs on this game that you need to use shop items to guarantee that the gameplay isn't going to fall apart. And you also get another kind of knife from the shop, and it's called the Hot Dogger, and what it does is it sets the enemies on fire, it does a lot more damage, and it has more range. And personally, I wouldn't really put myself in a position where I'm going to use that, even though the idea of a different knife sounds very intriguing. Since Resident Evil 7, you got the survival knife later on in the game, but you never got to use the survival knife as a New Game Plus item, or even in DLCs of Resident Evil 7, which was kind of disappointing, because I loved the survival knife on that game. It was a really powerful tool if put into the right hands. I've always appreciated the Resident Evil games that don't support the idea of knife only, because the knife really stands out in certain sections of the game, and it makes it feel like it has a lasting impact. When you're doing knife-only runs of the other Resident Evil games, and the knife is really the only tool you're using, it just kind of loses value over time when it's your only weapon. I mean, just to give you a great example, like, look at the Magnum, for instance. There's a reason why people use the Magnum for very specific moments, because it's a very powerful tool, and it just shines in those particular moments, and it creates that lasting impact. And that's what I feel about the knife in the Resident Evil games that aren't possible to do knife only. The knife just feels like such a special tool. And oftentimes with the Resident Evil games that are designed for knife only, they have to scale back everything to support the idea of a knife only run, because if you notice, in every single Resident Evil game that's possible to do knife only, the bosses are simplistic, the enemies are simplistic, and you're never really put into a position where you're like, oh my god, this enemy is very threatening. There's really no way I can do this without using the knife. You know, I really respect the lethality of the enemies on this game, and, you know, I respect the fact that, you know, you're put into these very diverse situations, like what you got with Carlos in that Defend Jill sequence, because, I mean, survival horror is supposed to account for every possible scenario. But for Capcom to say that this game is designed for knife only, it kind of forces me to undermine the value that the enemies have when it comes to the designs that are put into them. And I know it just doesn't seem like the logical thing to do, but that's just how I feel with a lot of the enemies. And some of the enemies on this game are pretty simplistically designed. I mean, the Anti-Alpha Parasites and the Pale Heads, they're very simplistically designed, and where their simplistic design comes all the bullcrap. And it's because of those enemies that doing this game knife only just really falls apart. I mean, when it comes to Hunter Gammas are a different story. And when I just saw the way the Hunter Gammas reacted to the knife's hit detection, it was absolutely incredible when they went into that stun animation. And, you know, I only get that kind of feeling in Resident Evil games that aren't built for knife only, because when you use the knife in those particular situations, in a game that's designed around all the guns, it comes as quite a shock. And this was the case with Resident Evil 4 and Resident Evil 6 and Resident Evil 7. Like, those games had sections built into them where if you used the knife for a very specific moment, you were going to achieve a really great result. I mean, look at Krauser from Resident Evil 4, for instance. Krauser was a boss that was resistant to every single gun you had except for the knife, because the developers wanted you to use the knife in that particular moment. And then in Resident Evil 6, you know, there are certain situations where you could use the knife to save up on ammo, and it was pretty handy on that game. And in Resident Evil 7, there are a lot of different ways of using the knife to deal with the molded, and when you were able to knock the fast molded out of the air and kill them with the knife, it was such a satisfying feeling. If you guys haven't seen my walkthrough of Resident Evil 7, you should check it out, and I demonstrate just how powerful the knife can be when you use it intelligently. In fact, this actually leads me on to another game that comes to mind, The Evil Within. In The Evil Within, you had the ability to stomp, and the stomp on that game was completely useless. It could not kill Haunted, and the Haunted were the main enemy that you came across in that game. But when you reached Chapter 7 and 14, you came across a new enemy type, which was the Alter Ego, and if you knocked over this enemy, or this enemy was in a prone position, you could use the stomp to instantly kill it. So for those specific chapters, the stomp really shined, and those enemies took a beating from every single weapon. But if you use the stomp intelligently, you could save up on ammo. Oh, by the way, right here, this is a really odd choice. For some reason, they put a Hunter Gamma before these moments where you're forced to flinch, and thankfully you do get iframes during the flinch, but it just seems very awkward in its design. And when you come down that ladder, you have to make sure you hesitate for a second so that the Hunter Gamma catches up to you, so that when you get into that flinch animation, he's going to attack you during the animation and not after it. And when it comes to this section, they introduce a diverse assortment of enemies. They practically put every single enemy you come across, aside from the Drain Demos, in this whole entire section. There's zombies, there's Paleheads, there's dogs, there's Hunter Gammas, there's Anti-Alpha Parasites, there's Hunter Betas. It's very interesting. Like, you can definitely tell the game's building up to a penultimate final showdown with Nemesis if they're putting in all of these different enemies in one single room. But going back to the statement that I made about knife-only runs on this game, there's no way this game could be designed for knife-only. Like, if you have to spam healing items and shopping items in order to get through this game knife-only on Inferno difficulty without taking any damage, it just can't be designed for knife-only. And there are people who believe that developers designed these kind of games around taking damage because of the inclusion and placement of healing items. But objectively, that doesn't make any sense. If I can get through this game no damage, then it makes total sense that I should be able to get through the game knife-only no damage. And to further add on to that, spamming healing items is the kind of thing you do on easy or normal difficulty, which makes you not want to learn the game, even though the developers took the time to design different animations for enemies, for instance. If the developers designed their game around healing items, then there's barely any effort put into polishing hitboxes, and this creates poorly designed enemies, even though that is the case with a lot of the enemies on Resident Evil 3 Remake. I mean, you've seen my poor designs of Resident Evil 3 Remake videos. There are some pretty poor design choices put into place that really bring this game down in quality. And also, why would they put in such slow animations with the danger state if the game is designed around healing items? And also, why would they put in a lot of instant kill attacks that supersede healing items? Like, all of this seems averse to the idea of a game being designed around healing items. Like, objectively, this game is designed around no damage for anyone who actually takes the time to understand the game. So saying a game is possible to do knife only, but you have to spam healing items in order to get past the bullcrap doesn't make any sense. There's no kind of skill involved whatsoever. Like, spamming healing items is not skillful play. But then there's going to be people who say that, oh, using healing items at the right moment is a skill, but all they're doing is bending the truth to match the contours of their passion by just deleting and inserting words. Like, breathing is a normal thing, but we don't inflate something as simple as that by calling it a skill. The healing items are simply there to help you learn how to play the game at its best in the future. Like, healing on this game doesn't feel like a natural thing to do, whereas in games like Resident Evil 5 and 6, it felt natural and it benefited the overall flow of the game. But in Resident Evil 3 Remake, it just doesn't feel natural when you're using healing items or when you're doing a knife only. And going back to the knife only topic, like, I just don't think the developers understand what they're saying a lot of the times if it goes against the designs they've set for in this game, or they probably just don't know how to communicate it. For me personally, if I ever think about knife only in this game, I think I'll probably just do a couple of knife only videos on bosses, on enemies, or on different sections, but I'll not do a full-blown knife only run of this game. My Hunter Gamma kill on Inferno difficulty using only the knife without taking any damage was very popular with a lot of people. You know, I've already received at least 800 views on that video, and I've received at least 21 likes. So, it's a pretty popular topic at this point, but, you know, I want to actually enjoy this game. I don't want to destroy my experiences with this game by doing a completely stupid run like knife only. I do these kind of runs on the Resident Evil games so that I actually have fun, I'm actually learning the game, and I'm actually showcasing the game at its best. You know, that's what I feel like I'm doing with this walkthrough right now. I feel like I am showing Resident Evil 3 at its best, and I'm helping out a lot of people when I'm using, like, the bare minimum of resources, because I didn't go to the hospital area as Jill, and I only went to one room in the hospital just to get Magnum ammo. You know, I just think this is how you're supposed to play this game, because it just flows really nicely, and the fact that you have to plan ahead for future sections really makes it feel like you're getting involved with the game. You know, I definitely think this is one thing that this game nails really nicely. It really feels like you're getting involved with the game, and despite the simplistic designs with the enemies, like for instance with the pale heads and with the anti-alpha parasites, you know, when you're doing actions like the dodging, or when you're just, you know, getting your shots out when you can, it feels like a very satisfying experience. And that's just why I like this game more so than Resident Evil 2 Remake. I just didn't feel like I was getting involved that much with Resident Evil 2 Remake because of how simplistically designed that game is. And just the fact that knife only was your best option on that game. Doing anything else, it just felt like you were impacting the flow of the game. But I think I've said enough about that particular tangent. Let's just talk about what's happening right now. So, we are currently in the main area of Nest 2, and this is pretty challenging if you don't have a lot of ammo. But thankfully on Inferno difficulty, they just fill you up with so much high-grade gunpowder just to craft Magnum ammo. And if you've been saving your shotgun shells properly, you're going to have a lot of ammo to deal with the pale heads and also with the anti-alpha parasites and also the hunters. But as you can see right now, I don't have a lot of shotgun shells because I've been mainly prioritizing the Magnum ammo and also the grenade launcher. But this part right here, there are so many pale heads, and you need to use the Magnum on this part. The pale heads will die instantly with one Magnum shot to the head, And what I normally do against the Paleheads is I dodge towards them and I get enough distance away from them that they're not going to spam grab on me. And I can only guarantee that if I don't accidentally dodge into them. And that can happen a lot of the times and you have no control over it. But with the way I was just handling these enemies right now, and with how confident I was feeling with this particular section of the game, I just felt like dodging into them. Since the dodge on this game is a context-sensitive dodge, you know, using it against fast attacks, you're going to get the detection every single time because you're afforded a lot more leniency with when you're supposed to press the button. And, you know, I mentioned it before, the dodge on this game is really good. I really like it better than Resident Evil 3's dodge. I'm talking about the original version, and it's miles better than Resident Evil Revelation's dodge. The dodge on that game had really poor detection, and the enemies just oftentimes spammed you at the end, and you didn't really have any way of initiating a dodge after that, whereas on this game, that spamminess does happen, but there are safeguards put in play that can help. It's just, you don't really get a lot of opportunities to use it on Inferno difficulty when the enemies can spam grab a lot. But, you know, the fact that they've intelligently designed this game and the bosses to accommodate a lot of these dodges, you know, like, the final boss fight of this game, you have to understand how to dodge his attacks. You can't just simply run away from them. The game forces you to dodge them, and I really like that. I think the final boss fight on this game is my favorite fight in the game. And I would honestly consider it the hardest boss fight I've ever done in the Resident Evil games. That's just how many times I've died on that particular boss fight, and I didn't really feel like it was my problem. And there were a couple of moments where it was bullcrap. Like, for instance, with the pustules that he fires, they have very perfect aim, and if they stun you, and he goes into an attack animation, you're done for. And they can even make you flinch, and you go into that uncontrollable flinch animation that gives you no iframes, and you're dead. And then there are moments when he does his roar move, and the roar move, I feel like I dodge the move perfectly, but then when I dodge it the same way, I just get moments where I get hit. It might just be me. I'm gonna say it's me. I mean, I don't think the move is too bullcrap, but you have to make sure you're dodging that roar move accordingly, because if you don't dodge the roar move, you're never going to be able to recover from the animation fast enough. And speaking of animations, the final boss fight on this game, the way they've augmented the final boss to have so many different moves, and he is just going to be at his absolute best for the full entire fight, it was so surprising for me. I've never seen a boss undergo that many augmentations that scale with the difficulty. It was just so surprising. I thought he was just going to be doing the exact same moves like he did on hardcore difficulty, but it turns out on Nightmare and Inferno, he gets quite the upgrade. And I really enjoyed doing the final boss fight on this game, and I watched SHAREfactory's video of the final boss fight on Inferno difficulty, and he actually found a way to do 2 of the power cells that you're supposed to push in rapid succession in one stun, and I was able to replicate it successfully, but he used the Magnum on that encounter, and I used the pistol, and most of the time when I get to that boss fight, I barely have any ammo because of that third boss fight, and because I use the bare minimum of resources. Oh, by the way, right here, this is a leashing area. If you stand near the elevator, any alpha parasites will not go the full distance when it comes to closing the distance to you, and they will just path back to that area there, and they will just stand still. And if their backs are to you, you can just hit them in the back of the head. And there's one more Palehead here, but I don't have any good ammo to deal with him because the regen rate on his health is ridiculous. If you have not seen anyone have the health mod enabled on PC, and you've not seen just how quickly this guy can regenerate his life, you're gonna be in for a shock. This guy can take, like, acid rounds, incendiary rounds, grenade rounds, and mine rounds. Like, he can take all sorts of shots from the grenade launcher, and his health just will not deplete. Like, you have to hit him in rapid succession, otherwise it's not going to work, and this is an enemy you cannot kill knife only, obviously, and the pistol just doesn't work against this enemy because it fires too slowly. But luckily for me, his crappy pathing works in my favor, because he's going to go all the way to the left and go near that supply case, and I'll be able to run past him. And you want to make sure you're crafting acid rounds and explosive rounds. There's going to be a sequence coming up where you're going to have to fight 5 hunters, and it's mandatory kills, because that's the only way to exit the room, because it's kind of a lockdown mode. And acid rounds are incredibly powerful against hunters. It'll take 2 acid rounds to kill them, but I recommend using 1 acid round to stun 2 hunters, and then finish them off with explosive rounds. Mine rounds don't seem to do that much damage compared to explosive rounds, which is why the explosive rounds are highly recommended. But the hunters always spawn from the exact same spots, and on this initial beginning, they spawn in this location, and the first hunter will always taunt at you, but then the second hunter will always run near him, and if you time it just right, you'll stun both of them, aim for him, and most likely, that other hunter will get killed as well. But there are times when it doesn't work because the splash damage on the explosive rounds is inconsistent. And I've stunned these guys over here, and I'm just waiting for them to be out of the recovery frames so that the full damage from the acid rounds can take place. And since I'm out of explosive rounds, I'm going to have to use the shotgun to finish this guy off. And now we have just one hunter left, but I figure I'd do something special. I'm going to kill this guy with the knife, and I'm going to demonstrate why Jill is so much better at fighting hunters compared to Carlos. It's because the dodge is just built for this enemy. And every single time I hit this enemy and he stumbles forward, he's just going to keep doing this one move so long as his weak spot isn't exposed. The moment his weak spot is exposed, he's going to do his instant kill attacks, and I'll have to dodge him differently. And every single time I knife him, the hit stun is consistent because of the fact that I'm hitting him multiple times. Compared to the shove, which gave you so much forward momentum that it put you in some really bad positions, the dodge is so helpful against this guy. And it takes quite a while to kill this guy. And that right there was his really fast backhand attack. Although that wasn't really a backhand attack. He just did a frontal slash that managed to cover a very wide angle. And it's one of his most dangerous moves because it's so fast and you can barely see it coming. But now that I've exposed his head, he's going to do his instant kill attack, which is this. And that just seems very fast for an instant kill attack. And the amount of times I have been hit by that instant kill attack as Carlos because the shove has given me poor detection, or I put myself in a very bad spot because of the shove's forward momentum, or because of the fact that I was just caught in an animation and I couldn't get away. Like, it's really, really hard to fight hunters as Carlos. Like, this is definitely the intended way that the developers set for fighting hunters knife only. But you obviously cannot kill these hunters all at once because they have incredible amounts of life, and right now his AI is being stupid. You can stay to the side of him and continue rotating around him, but eventually he'll just decide to backstep, and if he backsteps, he'll get out of the loop. So you'll have to re-engage the loop again if you get him into the right spot. But he finally dies, and that is the end of this section. And that can be pretty tricky if you don't understand the spawns and if you don't have enough acid rounds or explosive rounds to deal with them. But it's absolutely paramount that you kill the enemies in this room over here before entering the room I'm in right now, because there is a tendency for these enemies to hide behind doors and ambush you, and this is going to happen right here. Watch this. This Palehead that I let live, he's right there for some bizarre reason. Why is he there? I have no idea. And that kind of bullcrap that the enemies can do is something inherited from Resident Evil 2 Remake, because the enemies did that all the time in Resident Evil 2 Remake if you left the rooms very quickly. And it got me screwed so many times when I was doing the laboratory section, or in the earlier parts of the game when I was in the RPD building. I mean, I don't understand what the developers were thinking with that particular design choice. Like, they should always put in a kind of programming system where the enemies are never near the door. And this actually leads me on to another tangent involving Resident Evil Resistance, or as I like to call it, Project Resistance, because I hate putting the title Resident Evil in that game, because Project Resistance is hardly what I would consider a decent Resident Evil game. Even though I did play with Mr. Death earlier today, and it was a lot of fun because Mr. Death and his friend were very capable partners, and we were just communicating, and everything was just working out. Like, when you have a good team of survivors, it can be a lot of fun, but it is very unbalanced, and the Mastermind is just able to place a lot of explosive traps and enemies behind doors, and for certain doors you have to bash them open, and the forward momentum gain from that will cause you to trip a lot of traps or get put into an enemy's grab. And he can even place traps on stairs. I saw this in one of my matches with Mr. Death. I saw at least 3 explosive traps placed on the staircase that you need to use in order to get into one of the main areas of the game, and it's just so stupid that that is allowed. How the heck could Capcom miss something as simple as that? Like, they missed a lot of important issues with Project Resistance that really bring down the quality of that game. And Ellen0325 said this statement in one of my earlier live streams of the Resident Evil 3 Remake demo, and he said that Project Resistance is Capcom's excuse for lack of content, and I 100% agree with Ellen. Like, that game is just so underdeveloped, and there's just not a lot of time put into the game to really make it feel like a fleshed out experience. It just feels like a completely unbalanced, rushed game. And I really didn't enjoy a lot of the public matches I got into. And it was only when I was playing with Mr. Death that I really started to enjoy it a little bit more, when I wasn't getting screwed by bullcrap too much. But We're fighting the third boss right now, which is exactly the same as the second boss, only you don't have any kind of statue in the middle of the arena to help you out. And in the beginning, you have to damage him a certain amount of times in order to trigger the cutscene with Carlos. And the flame rounds are more than enough. Like, they give you more than enough ammo to keep this guy stun locked. And once this cutscene plays, he moves on to the second phase, and you can keep him stun locked for a little bit at the start of the second phase, and he will only start to trigger the zombies that spawn in this encounter when he goes up on the outskirts. And on Inferno difficulty, you have to deal with pale heads, which is bullcrap. You have not seen just what these pale heads are capable of in this walkthrough. They are so fast, they cover distance to you very quickly, they can do the any alpha grab and gain even more range, and you will just get screwed so much by these enemies in this boss fight. I have no idea who thought it was a good idea to put in zombies for this boss fight, but the fact that Nemesis needs zombies to support him in this boss fight just goes to show how simplistically designed he is, even though, you know, the hit stun he's taking from the weapons is pretty helpful. But it's such a shame I wasn't able to keep him stun locked a little bit more at the start of the second phase, and I unfortunately got screwed by the auto reload function because I had mine rounds equipped and I was about to run out of mine rounds, and I assumed I had to press L1 to load the explosive rounds, but it turns out the game automatically did it for me, so all I had to do was swap my weapons, and I didn't do that. Instead, I had pressed L1 and I swapped to a different grenade round that I didn't want, and it screwed my ability to get the stun lock effectively. But not that it matters anyway, because I think this boss has way too much life. I'm sure we can all agree that this boss has way too much life. I don't understand why they would have to give this guy so much life, let alone make it very similar to the second boss fight. But we've now put him into the third phase, and believe it or not, in the second phase, whenever you electrocute him with the generators, it does absolutely no damage, which is preposterous and absolutely stupid. It should do damage, but for some reason it doesn't do it. But on the third phase, it'll actually do damage. It's not the electricity that's doing damage, it's the fact that Nemesis is stunned in that particular spot, so Carlos is going to be able to hit him. And he pours acid all over Nemesis, and this is actually very strong. If you repeat this 3 times, Nemesis will go down. And you don't have to do this, you can just repeatedly shoot him with a grenade launcher, because you won't be needing the grenade launcher for the final boss fight, because the grenade launcher is absolutely useless in that fight, and so are the normal grenades if you happen to have any hand grenades. And right now, because of the fact that there are zombies around, I can't reliably run in a circle around this guy, so I'm going to have to just run away and just hug the outer circle of this arena in order to make sure that Nemesis is doing his long-range attacks. And Nemesis is going to alternate between standing on the generator and doing a jump attack directly on you. So the next time he decides to go on the outskirts of the arena, he's going to try to go onto a generator, and I'll be able to shock him by shooting the buttons, and that move is incredibly dangerous. If you get any moments where Nemesis is doing the horizontal strike on thin air, it means that most likely he's going to do the second attack, which is that really dangerous tentacle attack that has a lot of range, and you will always have to dodge it because it has that much range. And there's the slam move. You gotta make sure you're dodging the moment his body gets close to you, because his entire body is classed as a hitbox when he does that attack. And every single time you run around Nemesis in a clockwise pattern, he's most likely going to do that particular horizontal strike, which is very easy to dodge. And he's going on the outskirts of the arena right now, and you have to make sure you're paying attention to where the zombies are, and you have to make sure you're hitting the buttons very quickly before the zombies have a chance to get to you. Do you notice how the camera is really close to me right now? For some reason on the second and third boss fights, the camera is bugged. Whenever you aim, or whenever you go into the dodge camera view, the camera view gets locked in that position, and I don't know why. It can be very disorienting for a lot of people, but if you stand still or if you dodge, you will get back into the normal camera view, which is the camera view you want, so you can actually see what Nemesis is doing. Same strategy as before, just keep running away from him and make sure you're taking as wide of turns as possible. You might have to do some sharp turns just in case he gets close to you. And he's back on the outskirts of the arena. He's going to do his jump attack. And you normally don't have to do the perfect dodge because the tracking on that move is pretty fair compared to the clock tower jump that he does on the second boss fight. Not that you even have to worry about it because the statue just completely stops his jump attack whenever he jumps from the clock tower. But sadly, you don't have that kind of advantage in this fight. You just have all these zombies supporting this boss-like enemy who's supposed to be the most intimidating thing in this game, but the fact that he is designed the way he is just makes it absolutely abysmal and just poor in its designs. I don't know if they had low budget when designing this game, but it just doesn't feel like this game had low budget because this game feels more fully realized than Resident Evil 2 Remake. But why on earth would they settle with a boss design like this? for the most part, even though there are 4 bosses on this game, it feels like you're fighting 3 bosses. Because the second and third boss fights are literally the exact same thing, but just with a different aesthetic to them. Only this one, it communicates that you're supposed to shoot the buttons in order to stun Nemesis. And you don't need the mine rounds whatsoever for this fight. But that is the end of that fight. A fight that I managed to nail on the first try, which was very surprising. And we are now about to make our way over to my favorite boss in the game. Because it's really well designed, and it forces you to be good at it when you're forced to dodge his attacks the way you're supposed to do. The one big problem I have with the dodge aspect is if you are on the outskirts of the arena, namely in the back of the arena, you are going to get moments where he's going to hit you, but the dodge just doesn't detect and you end up getting killed. So you have to stay relatively close to Nemesis, but not too close to him, because he has one really dangerous move where he will plant his arms on the ground and just drag him along the floor. And it covers a lot of range, and you won't be able to get away from it fast enough, and you'll have to dodge it because the attacks are way faster on Inferno difficulty. But grab the pistol ammo before activating the railgun, and stay right here. Watch what he does. He's either going to do a chain slam move, a 3-hit combo, or the roar. For the roar, you have to wait a second for him to actually do the animation, and then you have to dodge it. If you dodge any earlier than that, you will always get hit by it. In this move right here, the chain slam will never hit you the full way, but the final hit will. And the thing you need to know about the final hit on Inferno difficulty is it will track you. There are times when it won't track you, but then there are times when it can track you. So you have to assume it will track you. And you'll know this because when you're not in the path of that chain slam, he will actually angle a swing in your direction. And right here, I'm about to demonstrate how you get 2 power cores in 1 stun. So you have to make sure this weak spot is last and get near this power core. Make sure you are standing on the right hand side of the arena so that he does that particular move, because every time he does his drag move like that, he will always follow that up with a series of chain slams. And you can run towards his power cell while he's doing his chain slams and it won't hit you. And then while he's doing the chain slams, you use your shotgun or your pistol or your magnum in order to hit that final weak spot and then push in that power cell. But you've got to be very careful with the second power cell. That's really where the risk factor really comes into play, because you don't have a lot of time to push in that power cell before he gets a chance to grab you, because every time you go for the power cells while he's in a neutral state, he will always do a grab move. And the timing on the grab move is always the same, but on Inferno difficulty it's a little bit faster, so you have to get off the power cell very quickly. One thing to know about that grab move is when his arms are not glowing and you interact with the power cell, he will do a delayed grab animation. But if his arms are glowing and you go to interact with that power cell, he will immediately cancel whatever he's doing and just do an instant grab, and it will always catch you, so there's nothing you can do. You have to wait until his arms are not glowing in order to interact with that power cell. But that's the end of the fight right there. All I gotta do is just push this last power cell in, and I'm gonna be able to interact with the railgun and finish him off. You just gotta make sure you're watching out for those pustules when they fire the acid at you. You can dodge through the acid, and if you don't dodge the acid, there are times when it won't do any damage to you, but then there are other times when it will do chip damage to you. And you have to make sure you're checking your health every single time you get hit by that acid, just in case you took damage or not. But you'll know you took damage because the health icon will go from a dark green to an olive green if you took damage. But all you gotta do here is do the quick time vents and just finish him off with the rail cannon. And that right there is a really challenging boss fight that I managed to trivialize very easily. Just practice that boss fight and you will be fine. I'm still amazed that they somehow managed to make a boss fight that's harder than Lucas Baker from Resident Evil 7. Lucas Baker from Resident Evil 7 is a boss fight that I consider to be the hardest boss fight out of every single boss I've done in the Resident Evil series. But that all changed when I did this boss fight on Inferno difficulty. I just cannot believe that they gave him so many different augmentations on Inferno difficulty. And the amount of moves he has at his disposal is incredible. And it's all because of the fact that Jill has a dodge in this game. And a lot of people assume that having a dodge in a survival horror game is a bad thing. But if they play this game on Inferno difficulty, they will be sadly mistaken. But all we have to do now is deliver the final shot to Nikolai, and that will conclude my Resident Evil 3 Remake, Inferno difficulty. No damage, no shop items, S rank walkthrough. Thank you all for watching, and you take care now.